So I want to move on to some of the things that are said in your reading and elsewhere that are defending speciesism, or at least written by people who appear to believe that they're defending speciesism, and see what can be said about that. So I'll start with the Bernard Williams article, and I think Bernard Williams is correct in that what he's defending is speciesism. So this is a clear case of what I think we ought to reject. Williams actually calls his article the human prejudice. The term prejudice is something that we normally use in a negative sense to prejudge something. We talk about racial prejudice, for example, and we think that that's a bad thing, something that we ought to get rid of. But Williams is here championing human prejudice, species prejudice, in other words. And he's saying it's a mistake to think that the view that he's defending and that he thinks is an ethical view is one that says, from the point of view of the universe, remember that phrase that the 19th century utilitarian Henry Sidgwick used, from the point of view of the universe, we humans are more valuable than any other species. No, he's not saying that. He's rather saying we humans are human. And so it's natural for us and right for us to take a greater interest in the well-being of humans. And so he imagines that there was a species of aliens that came, that let's say came from one of these other billions of planets that exist in the universe, some of which may be suitable for supporting life. And so we imagine that we are invaded by aliens and they want to take us over. Maybe they actually could rule the world better than we could, so that there would be more happiness on the world than the way we're running it. That doesn't seem too implausible if they were a lot more rational than us. But nevertheless, if they wanted to rule us or dominate us in order to produce a greater total of happiness, Williams thinks that we would be right to resist that, and the question wouldn't be what produces the best universe as a whole. The question would be, which side are you on? Well, I guess you can understand where Williams is coming from. You can think about the emotions that get evoked if you or some group that you identify with, whether it's your family or your country or perhaps your ethnic group or your religion, you can often imagine these conflicts in which people say, which side are you on? It might be in a sports, your sports team or something like that. You can imagine situations where you're playing sport and somebody on your team points out that a foul has been committed by your team to the advantage of the other team, or you don't want to take a foul or a penalty or whatever it is that the referee or umpire has awarded to you. You say, no, it wasn't like that. Well, in the conflict of that, you may say to your teammate, hey, which side are you on? Don't we want to win this game? Even though perhaps you recognise at the same time that ethically your teammate is right and the referee made the wrong decision. Well, that might be okay or might not. I mean, it's an interesting question whether you should or shouldn't do that in a sports competition. But certainly on a larger scale where there's a lot more at stake, it seems to me clear that you shouldn't just be saying which side are you on. And in fact, once you allow that kind of reasoning in an imaginary conflict between humans and another species, then how are you going to draw the line with people who are, let's say, white supremacists, who think that the white race ought to dominate the world or dominate this country? And if they say to you, if you're also white, well, which side are you on? Obviously, you're going to say, look, I may be of the same race or ethnic group as you, but that doesn't mean that it's right to disregard the rights or interests of others. And I think exactly the same argument applies here to Williams. So, although Williams has been an influential philosopher in various ways, I think that on this issue he's gone really completely in the wrong direction. Okay, let's look at another view. Here's another even better known philosopher, John Rawls, the most significant American philosopher, political philosopher of the late 20th century. In a theory of justice, he develops a social contract view, and he says that, towards the end, he says that really justice is something that can only apply to beings with a sense of justice. They have to be capable of reciprocating. So justice really is for all and only humans. He doesn't deny that there can be other important moral considerations that may apply to animals. He sort of says that in a short paragraph at the end of this section, but not justice. And you get the sense that justice is really more important than these other things that apply to individual animals. Now, a question to ask here is, well, why does it apply to all humans if it requires a sense of justice? Because again, infants and intellectually disabled humans may not be able to have a sense of justice. And Rawls sort of fudges here. He doesn't really say very much. He says something like, well, I assume that this is a problem that could be resolved, but he doesn't tell you exactly what his solution is. So that to me also seems to be evidence of a bias, that somehow it must be the case that we can work out the position of intellectually disabled humans, but animals, obviously, we can't. And just in fact, the fact that the whole question of animals is treated so briefly in what is a very large book is a sign that he's not really taking this seriously as an important issue. But a clearer case perhaps comes from the article by Carl Cohen, which is on your reading list. Cohen actually says that he is a speciesist, but what he says here is completely compatible with rejecting speciesism. It's completely compatible with what I've just said and what I have said in my writings on this all the time, that, of course, differing beings have differing natures and we have to take different obligations in accordance with that. So that's not a reason for being a speciesist, the fact that you accept this idea. So what is it that, where is it that Cohen and I really differ? Well, we'll come to that in a moment. Here's Bentham again. You remember on Monday I talked about this question that he raises. The question is not can they reason, nor can they talk, but can they suffer? This is a part of the same passage where he's really making the point that, that I've been making, that if we can't really talk about all humans as having capacities or natures or a sense of justice that is superior to that of non-human animals. It will depend on exactly what the human is that we're talking about, and some animals will be beyond, superior to the capacities of some humans. So what that's suggesting is that we ought to be looking at them as individuals and considering their capacities in that way, not on the basis of their species. But this is what Cohen seems to want to reject. Right? He says, the issue is one of kind, and humans are of a kind that they may be the subject of experiments only with their voluntary consent, whereas animals are not of that kind. But of course, it's nonsense to ask an infant for its voluntary consent to be part of medical research. But we do medical research on infants, otherwise we could not develop better techniques of saving the lives of, let's say, premature infants? Well, you might say, we can ask their parents to consent on their behalf. And that's true, but you could do something similar for animals as well. You could have legal guardians. Courts often appoint guardians for humans. You could appoint guardians for animals to give consent on their behalf. So that's not in itself an indication. And then, of course, there may be humans who are intellectually disabled, whose parents are no longer alive, perhaps who don't have any close kin, and there we do appoint court-appointed guardians to deal with them. The problem here is with a claim that we're talking about a kind, that is the nature of the species as a whole, and that this must apply to every one of them, even if they are evidently not of that kind, even if they are of a different kind that can't give their consent. So that's why this is a choice between deciding on the basis of type or deciding on the basis of individual. And I'd suggest that in general it's better to decide on the basis of the capacities of individuals, not to just say they're of a kind. Because you can group people in all sorts of different ways. And generally we don't want to be judged by what is a characteristic that others may have, but that we do not have. We want to be judged as individuals.